The mover can reply. Oh, sorry, Senator Sige.
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. As I rise to also make a comment on the motion by the leader of majority, Mr. Speaker, it is not lost in us that the Honorable Senator Gloria did indeed exercise her right to seek for judicial intervention, and a finding was made by the court. As to her choice not to pursue an appeal against that decision which went against her, could be a revelation on her part as to the importance of seeking to apologize before the House, because that decision she was seeking to challenge was occasioned by the decision of this House. And as much as the House had made a decision to punish her for a period of 79 days, in the presence of an apology on her part to the members, I believe including the victim of the actions that led to the punishment by the House, is sufficient in the circumstances, particularly where the mover of the motion has not completely proposed that the punishment be rescinded, as it has only been reduced from 79 days to 30 days. From where I sit, Mr. Speaker, having a colleague who has, without hesitation, sought to be forgiven by the members, all who could have been or could not have been affected by the decision that was made, should be considered, and the period of punishment be reduced as proposed by the leader of majority. And so, as we consider this, I am very sure that the majority leader will also be able to speak to a few of the issues that members have raised here in the context of a decision having been made, and also the position of the victim of the utterances that led to the subject that we are debating this afternoon. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for granting me the opportunity.
Senator Eddie Okech.
Mr. Speaker, this is a very difficult issue for me to speak about, because I am a new member of this House, and as a new member of this House, I depend on the different legal instruments of this House on such matters. And one of the things that I never want to vary is the wisdom of the leadership of the House. When such a motion has been sponsored by the majority leader, I never want to vary that, because there is wisdom in that leadership. That's why you have leadership in the House. So perhaps what will guide my judgment in supporting or not supporting this motion, number one, is just guidance from the majority leader that the decisions are made of this magnitude in this House. Do they merit as functus officio? I.e., under Article 125 of the Constitution, where powers and privileges comes and pronounces itself, then we make a judicious decision. Fundamentally, it means that that decision is made in the context of a high court of Kenya. That's what the Constitution gives us the power to do, because there were evidence that were required when the Honorable Senator sat in the Powers and Privileges Committee, which then falls within that Article 125. So the question in a layman's language is, once a court has made this decision, can it eat that decision? Can it come back and vary that decision? If I'm guided so as a judge, I can be able to talk about it. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the matter was further escalated by the Honorable Senator to the real courts. You know, we are a quasi-judicial house, but the matter was escalated to the courts, and the courts had a pronouncement on this matter. And I know that on the side of minority side, the leader of minority is a former judge. So again, my wisdom cannot in any way dispute whatever guidance he will give us on our side as a minority. But when the matter was escalated to court, and the court made a pronouncement on the matter, can we vary the pronouncement of that court and say that regardless of the fact that the court pronounced itself that the senator must serve the entire term. Is it still our decision, or is it still the decision of the court? Then lastly, Mr. Speaker, is on the very important issue that the Senator of Nairobi, the Honorable Senator of Nairobi, Senator Sifuna, has raised, which is the issue of the matter we are looking at here was not about the senator, was about the senator vis-a-vis senior staff members who are serving the institution of Senate and Parliament. And to the effect that there were allegations made by the Honorable Senator. Does apology, for which the backdrop, because you opened that window, which I think we should not have opened after the court decision, but because it was opened and that apology was given to her to make, that apology in its assessment, does it mean withdrawal of all the allegations against those members of the staff, to the extent that we need to be judicious, not only just the senator, but also to the staff members who are involved? So would that mean, by extension, that there will be a requirement, whether a pseudo requirement or an active requirement on the side of the senator, to actually withdraw all those allegations that were found to be baseless? Because then, that way, I think then will be a house that is fair to both parties that are involved in this issue without by any bipartisan nature. And I think that it might not be a question of just voting. Majority Leader, if I may beg, I think that this is just not a question that we might just discuss on the floor of the House, but also might need a wisdom on a small kamkunji, perhaps, where we can be able to discuss and see how we also maintain and protect the sanctity of the House, because we are setting a precedence for future generations. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Muma.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this motion by Majority Leader. Now, I will not be long on this issue. Honorable Speaker, this matter was decided in court, and I wish to bring it to the attention of the Senate, just in case the Senate is not aware. I think another case on this matter is still pending before the courts. My suggestion is that before we make a decision, because this involves a matter that might fall within character assassination of an individual, I don't know whether, as the Senate, we have the capacity to forgive on that matter on behalf of somebody who's not even before the Senate to be able to express themselves. My suggestion is that we get the JLAC committee to give us a view on what this means, and I pick the JLAC instead of the director or the Directorate of Legal, because it is a matter between a senator and member of staff. And I'm suggesting that a committee of the Senate be the one to look at these issues and to advise on whether we have the capacity or capability of giving the resolve or the reprieve that we want to give as we are proposing. Honorable Speaker, I also suggest that we actually need a policy in Parliament on matters relating to sexual harassment that touches on members of Parliament, so that we are able. I have read the policy on sexual harassment following what has happened in this House. I have read the policy on sexual harassment for Bunge, and that policy only covers members of staff. I think we need to move the Parliamentary Service Commission to actually put in place a policy and procedures on how to handle matters similar to this matter, because part of the challenge by the affected senator was that they did not have confidence in whatever process that we had. But having gone to court, they elected, or they were not able to persuade the court in the manner of this procedure. So my view is that it will be unfair for us to step in the shoe of the affected person and purport to make a decision on their behalf on this matter, having decided. And I think we can revisit it, and I personally have no problem in forgiving anybody, but I think we need the JLAC to give us a view on what they think, how they think we should handle this matter. Thank you.
Mover to reply, Majority Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank colleagues who have taken time to speak to this particular matter. Mr. Speaker, indeed, it's an interesting matter because it's not one that I'd have very strong feelings about on how a member decides on this particular issue. Because at the end of the day, I believe an apology that has been rendered and the punishment that this House rendered on the offenses that were committed by Senator Gloria Orwoba are personal. Therefore, if a member feels that indeed that particular member has owned up to their mistakes and has requested the House that they be given a lighter punishment, not that they are not punished completely, but be granted a lighter punishment. It is on that basis, Mr. Speaker, that I moved the House to reduce the sentence and the Senate to vary its resolution. There are a few things that have come up which I'll attempt to respond, Mr. Speaker. First is what Senator Sifuna raised with reference to the motion coming back to the House within a period less than 6 months. Mr. Speaker, sir, this motion was moved actually on the, to be specific, on the 23rd of September, 20th of September 2023. Therefore, it's far more beyond the 6 months period upon which you can bring a motion separate to the one that had earlier been resolved. Secondly, Senator Sifuna also inquired on the provisions cited, Section 17, 3D and G. The reference to them was to the punishment, not that the House has powers to do. Actually, the punishment that was meted to Senator Gloria by this House is in reference to those specific, that she be asked to leave the House for a certain period and also being asked to apologize. That is why, Mr. Speaker, in the final part of the motion, I have stated that there is a term there that when Senator Gloria Orwoba returns, should members agree with this motion, she will be admitted to this House on terms resolved by the Senate on 20th September 2023. So you have to ask yourself, what were the terms? If you have observed previously when a member has been kicked out of this House, it's also a very difficult experience. It's not something as easy as just walking back to the House. When she comes back, it is almost similar to the first day we came to this House, where you have the rostrum placed at the door there, and they formally apologize to all the people that they have wronged before the House finally agrees that they be admitted back. So, Mr. Speaker, it's not like we are making this sentence lighter. I have listened to Senator Catherine Muma, and I think there are two things perhaps you may need to remember. There were two cases on this matter. The one is where she contested the decision of the Senate, to which a full determination has been made, and the courts agreed with the decision of the Senate that actually we acted rightfully within the law to suspend her. And that's why the sentence now holds. The second matter is now the issue that you're referring to, where members are saying there's an individual who was maligned, there's an individual whose name was tarnished. That matter is still active before the court. And there is no way in which this decision, one way or the other, is saying that that matter before the court be ruled this way or the other. What we are resolving as a House, Senator Muma, is on the issue of the number of the days that she served the suspension. Is it 79 days or 30? And I felt, together with after consulting with colleagues, and said, the punishment she will serve anyway, because it needs to serve as a lesson. I continue to see sometimes us disrespect our own authority as a House, because every time I do something that is disrespectful in this House, Mr. Speaker, I am disrespecting the collective standing of this House, Mr. Speaker, before colleague senators and even before the country. Therefore, I want to agree with the decision that was made by the powers and privilege that for her conduct, Senator Gloria Orwoba must be punished. The only thing that we have requested you is that after having punished her, and given, in fact, the only thing that I reference to is the fact that she has since formally, or when granted an opportunity by the Speaker, apologized to the House, meaning that she has admitted that there is a way in which she behaved that was not up to the standing of a senator before all of us. Then I said, if that be the case, then I'd rather request the House that we review, not to waive the punishment, but just to review it from 79 days to 30 calendar days, which I find, Mr. Speaker, to be a fair ask of us colleagues, because like they say, to err is human, Mr. Speaker, that we can all sometimes mess. This does not in any way, Senator Eddy, take away the rights of the individual that you're speaking about, the clerk of the Senate. I'm sure that particular matter, and I wouldn't wish to speak long on that particular issue of the dispute between them, so as not to appear as if you are in support of this or the other particular person. I believe, because he strongly feels that his rights were violated, Mr. Speaker, that is a matter that is before the court. What is before us is a review of the punishment that this House passed on her. Remember, there is a case between the person who's accusing her, that she maligned her, and a case between her and senators, because senators felt that she had behaved inappropriately, and therefore senators punished her. This request is on the matter of the senators and the Senate of the Republic of Kenya versus our colleague, where we are saying, since our colleague has publicly come before us and said, I apologize, then let's review that particular sentence. I thought that will be clear and in any way does not prejudice the other matter that is between, that is in the courts, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I beg to reply. In accordance to Standing Order number 66, Mr. Speaker, I beg that we defer the putting of a question, given that I can see the number of people that are in the House, Mr. Speaker, wouldn't be sufficient to take a vote. And this is one such matter also where I would wish that when you are taking the vote, you have as many senators as possible in the House. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, Senators, Honorable Senators, we are going to defer putting of the question till tomorrow or when we have quorum, and we will go to the next order. Order number 13, Clerk.
Order number 13, motion, report of the Mediation Committee on the Conflict of Interest Bill, National Assembly Bills number 12 of 2023.
Vice Chair of the committee, Senator Sigei. Give Senator Sigei the mic.
Thank you. I already have it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Senate adopt the report of the Mediation Committee on the Conflict of Interest Bill, National Assembly Bills number 12 of 2023. Yes, National Assembly Bills number 12 of 2023. Mr. Speaker, this particular motion was laid, report was laid on the table of the House on 5th of December 2024. And Mr. Speaker, as I move this particular motion, it is incumbent upon me to run members through the very salient issues which we dealt with in the course of the joint sitting of the National Assembly JLAC and this particular House. And Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sigei, sorry. Could you please move the motion properly as indicated on the order paper, and then you can explain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will go through it again. I beg to move that the Senate adopts the report of the Mediation Committee on the Conflict of Interest Bill, National Assembly Bills number 12 of 2023, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 5th of December, 2024, and further that pursuant to Article 113, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution and Standing Order 167.3 of the Senate, approves the mediated version of the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I felt the need to allow the chair to settle down so that I proceed. Madam Speaker, this particular bill was passed by the National Assembly on the 30th of November in the year 2023. It was amended and passed by this House, that is the Senate, on the 4th of June 2024, and the Senate's amendments were thereafter forwarded to the National Assembly for consideration. It is thereupon, Madam Speaker, that on the 24th of July 2024, the National Assembly rejected the proposals for amendments which were made by this House in the course of its consideration of the bill. And pursuant to this particular rejection, Madam Speaker, a mediation committee was established. And this committee, for purposes of record for this House, comprised the following members: Senator Okongo Omogeni, Senator Mohamed Faki, Senator Manzo, Senator Crystal Asige, Senator Gloria Orwoba, Senator Mungatana, Senator Joe Nyutu, and Senator Chute. This committee was co-chaired by yours truly, myself, together with the chairperson of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of the National Assembly, the Honorable Murugara. Madam Speaker, we had 7 sittings, where in those 7 sittings we went through the various contentious issues and clauses on this particular bill. And I will just, for the highlight, just pick a few of them. One of which, Madam Speaker, is the fact that this particular bill is such an administration of the conflict of interest aspect, which in line with Article 79 of the Constitution was to reinstate the administration to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission as the primary enforcement authority or body. Madam Speaker, the earlier proposal and the amendments that were made by this House had expanded the primary authority not to domicile from EACC, that is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, but other bodies, which, following consideration by the Joint Committee, the committee came to conclude that it is incumbent upon the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to be the primary authority or the primary organ to administer the act. And that was mutually agreed upon by the 2 houses, that is membership from the National Assembly and the membership from this particular House. Secondly, Madam Speaker, another very important provision which was agreed upon was with regards to at what point do we make reference to a public officer being of a possibility to have personal gain where conflict of interest can be apparent in a situation. And in this particular case, members indeed agreed that as long as you were holding a public office, there is a very high likelihood that you will have personal gain on an aspect that a conflict of interest can be seen to be apparent, and therefore in instances where, for example, an issue is before the House being debated in 1 or 2 of the proceedings of the House, as a member you must, or you are required by law, and in this case this particular law, you are required to disclose that fact so that you make a choice, or the presidium at that time makes a choice as to whether you should be allowed to participate in such proceedings or not. And it is not only going to affect the committee of the whole, even in committee sittings of the various standing committees of both the National Assembly and the Senate, where a member has disclosed that conflict of interest could exist, then it's upon the chairperson who is presiding over and that particular member to make a choice whether such a member will continue sitting in the committee or not. And that particular provision, Madam Speaker, was uniformly agreed because of the desire to guard and protect the public officers and state officers from being exposed to participate in proceedings where they will be seen to have either influenced or in one way or the other involved themselves to make sure that a position that would be either prejudicial to the public or in benefit to them is involved if they are allowed to participate. That is one crucial provision that members agreed. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, is also a provision which was a bit contentious on prohibition by law of dual employment of public officers. In this particular aspect, it had been declined by the Senate, but the National Assembly had pushed that we need not have a public officer have dual employment. But the position the committee took was this is a provision that is already existing in other laws. And therefore, just for the sake of this conflict of interest bill, including it is basically what members called redundancy in enactment of laws. And members agreed unanimously to reject the inclusion of that provision because of the fact that it is already a provision that exists in Public Officers Ethics Act, which is an existing law, and it was superfluous to include that particular provision in the conflict of interest law, and the committee jointly agreed that that provision be deleted. Madam Speaker, as regards the aspect on declaration of income, assets or liabilities by members, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission on this particular proposed bill was required to also be involved in ensuring that such forms are filled in a more extensive way than the one that exists currently in the law. And the committee, Madam Speaker, was cognizant of the fact that the Public Officers Ethics Act indeed has got a provision requiring any public officer to make annual declaration of their assets, liabilities, and also income. And there is an existing schedule that requires how members are supposed to fill in and disclose those particular requirements on an annual basis. And therefore, where there is such an existing provision, it would not be necessary to still reintroduce it in this law. And similarly, it was agreed by the membership that it will be unnecessary to amend the schedule which serves that particular purpose in the existing law, and therefore members unanimously agreed that particular provision was to be excluded in the final draft. Another very interesting provision, Madam Speaker, that was considered in the course of this particular engagement by the Joint Committee was the requirement of a public officer who is a subject of investigation to be asked to step out of office for the entirety of the period of investigations. We are all aware that in this country, wherever there is any investigation that goes on, it is not known for how long will it take for such a process to be concluded. This particular law seeks to introduce a limitation on the time of suspension from an infinite period to a period of 90 days. And we are saying within these 90 days, whether or not investigations will be concluded, the moment 90 days lapses, the person is going to be automatically allowed to resume office, or if the investigating agent seeks to extend that period, they should do so pursuant to a judicial process so that we protect the interest of the person who is a subject of investigation as well as the public, where such investigation was to seek to protect whether it's public resources or in event of abuse of office. We are able to protect both the victim and also the office itself, because if we allow investigations to continue forever, people might abuse in most cases where they want to ensure that I don't get back to office. They delay the investigations, for instance, for a period until when my contract in office ends, or for whatever period of time they deem appropriate in the interest of those who are doing the investigations. We therefore then as a committee, Madam Speaker, agreed that if you are a subject of investigation, the timeline within which the investigation should be done is 90 days, failure to which then the agencies must seek an extension through the normal process, whether it's judicial or otherwise. They must formally do so, so that we know we also enable and facilitate such investigative agencies to be efficient in what they are doing, because by being efficient, they are able to conclude investigations. If it's a matter of protecting public resources, that can be done within a reasonable time. So, Madam Speaker, I want to conclude by saying that the entirety of the bill and the concerns which were contentious, raised by the Senate and National Assembly, were dealt with by this joint committee in the 7 sittings that were convened, and a final draft which has been tabled before this House. And I ask the members of this House to support this particular motion so that the bill can finally be approved and enacted by the National Assembly, having put into consideration the concerns as were raised by those who participated in the stakeholder engagement, the public participation, the National Assembly having also done their bit in public participation prior to them coming up with the bill, and this particular House having considered also contributions from a number of stakeholders, including the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, which is going to be the primary entity that will administer this particular act, among other players who also brought in their concerns, which were considered by the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and ultimately the draft that now went brought back and is the subject of this particular motion. Madam Speaker, the motion, therefore, that is before this House today is one that has put into consideration matters beyond the committee, matters beyond the House, and I urge the honorable members to support. And, Madam Speaker, I would like to request the Honorable Senator Eddie Okech to second this motion. I thank you.
Senator Okech.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I also want to thank my brother, the good senator from Bomet, for seeing it fit that I second this motion. I think, Madam Speaker, there is no any other important bill, in my view, that can be of serious attention to us than the bill that is at the backbone of this report that the joint committee that looked at this report from the National Assembly and our Assembly and our Senate have worked on. And my reasoning is very simple, Madam Speaker. My reasoning is that all the problems of this country lies on what this report and the subsequent bill, or rather the mediated version of the bill, agrees on. All our problems as a country comes from this problem of conflict of interest. Madam Speaker, there is a report called the Ndegwa report, the Ndegwa Commission report. And the Ndegwa Commission report, Madam Speaker, was presented to Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, the first president of Kenya, in May 1971. That report is available online, and I think that is also within our answers as Parliament. And the 398-page report, Madam Speaker, is a very, very rich report. It's a report that is as rich as the section of paper that were written by amazing patriots like Tom Boyer. But there is a part of that report that I think has been seriously disastrous to our country. And part of that report was when the Ndegwa Commission report suggested that civil servants can be able to do business while in government. This is our biggest problem, Madam Speaker, as a country. And despite the good intention that was put in that report, because when you read that report, some of the best professors wrote that report, and I find it extremely rich in terms of just rethinking the public service structure as well as just rethinking the remuneration of public servants, because you remember, Madam Speaker, that before 1971, public servants in this country used to earn the lowest amount of money. And alongside that, they were really not allowed to do business, because service was that, exactly that. Service was public service. You're called to duty, and you are able to do what you're called to do as a public servant for the nation. But the remuneration was very, very shallow. But, Madam Speaker, the moment this country opened an opportunity for the public servants in this country to be able to do business and create great wealth for themselves, it did not just stop at the idea of participating in the free market economy. It also meant that public servants would then go ahead and engage in doing business with government. And that is where the rot of this country started. The problem is that years later, it has become now an endemic problem in our budget-making process, especially when you think about Parliament and the executives. And this problem is not only within the national government and the national assemblies, that is the Senate and the National Assembly as is known in Parliament, but it's also now becoming a serious replica even in the county, in the county structure, in the devolved units of this country, where the budgeting process is made by the civil servants having queued and having secured a number of procurement opportunities that defrays the public from the services that they need in a various number of ways that can only become synonymous to porosity of serious resources getting into government, but the public can just never see where this money is going. Madam Speaker, it is easy today for Gen Zs and the younger generation to fight the symptoms of why our country is hemorrhaging in terms of serious taxations, but without service. But they can never get to the root cause of that problem if we don't give life to this report that is the first report that I see as an attempt to undo the wrongs of the Ndegwa Commission report. Because, Madam Speaker, if you look at other countries today, the countries that our young people are admiring, even if you take the Nordic countries, where young people are admiring when they look at the quality of good life, you'll find that, Madam Speaker, they are the countries that have got the highest form of taxation. But people there don't riot against taxation. People in those countries, citizens of those countries, never complain about any taxations. Why? Because tax raised by government goes and does what the country needs to do in terms of providing services for the population. Madam Speaker, you know that today, if you are in Norway, or if you're in Denmark, or if you are in Sweden, there are what we call services that are provided by government, but there's also what we call tax benefits. That even women in those countries today can go to work knowing very well that the government will even invest in the aftercare for their children when they are at work. But in our country today, the tax that is raised finds its way in the pocket of individuals by simple issue of civil servants doing business with government. This is the crust of what I call conflict of interest, that the others are not as bad as compared to this, Madam Speaker. Because today you come to Parliament and individuals have perfected the art of scavenging for what will be put in the budget tomorrow, on which road is going to belong to who, and which pseudo company am I going to put, including some proxies, that are then going to be able to supply or do a certain work for government, for which, because they are sitting at the seats of accountability, they cannot hold themselves to account. And nobody else can hold them to account, because the moment they have put a number of budgetary allocations to projects that they want to do with serious and dubious companies, then when it comes to this Parliament, they will sanitize themselves. And therefore, almost 70% of our taxes never go to do any job. Inflation in the procurement processes in this country, Madam Speaker, is an endemic problem that is becoming difficult to address. Because we have put in the DNA and the psyche of Kenyans that you actually you don't need to be an entrepreneur in this country. You don't need to think about enterprising economy, because the simplest way to get to wealth, the simplest way to amass wealth, whether primitively or in a pseudo manner that you are hiding, is simply to join government. Whether you join government as a legislature, whether you join government as a body in the judiciary, whether you join government in the executive, you are rest assured that you will be wealthier than any entrepreneur who has spent 20 years doing business in this country. This is a menace that young people in this country, serious patriots in this country, must rise to look at the eye of what the bill and the mediated version of this bill is proposing, so that we can be able to deal with this menace once and for all. And it's not going to be easy. Madam Speaker, since 1970 to date, when Duncan Ndegwa and the Central Bank sat together to rethink the public service structure of this country and endorse this kind of a commission report, and the resultant behavior of public servants being able to actually harvest from the public coffers to date is not an easy thing to fight. Even as we as we support this report and further go to agree as a House with our partners in the National Assembly to be able to actually make this bill come to life, Madam Speaker, we have got a serious war to wage against enterprising within government. It's a big problem. It's a big problem that if we don't give this particular bill, once it becomes law, we give it some truth, it will never be easy to run government. And Madam Speaker, it ends up going as well with the idea of abuse of office, Madam Speaker. People only abuse office because they have got power to be able to procure the services of whichever laws that are supposed to be able to enforce the laws in this country, or entities that be able to enforce the laws in this country. There's an ongoing debate right now, Madam Speaker, on what is going on in the judiciary. You remember in 2007, when after the crisis that we have in this country, people were rethinking and investing on rethinking our constitution, Madam Speaker, when some of the patriots in this country, including Honorable Raila Odinga at that time, were fighting so hard that we have a judiciary ombudsman. So that as we think about independent commissions that we have had in this country, Madam Speaker, those independent commissions like judiciary, we can be able to have ombudsman. People did not want it. And today, Madam Speaker, I dare say confidently that one of the most procured institutions of enforcing our laws in this country, Madam Speaker, is the judiciary. Because how do you explain, Madam Speaker, when a matter of urgency is put before a court of law in this country that needs a determination within 2 days or 3 days? For instance, what happened in the National Assembly when a determination was needed to be done within the time that the National Assembly was supposed to pronounce itself on who are the majority leader in the House. Then the judgment comes 2 years later, Madam Speaker. How do you explain that if it's not the procurement of the services of judges in this country? Who oversees our judges? The parliament can be oversighted by the judiciary. The executive can be oversighted by parliament. Who oversights our judges? The abuse of office has come to the extent that this House has witnessed the creation of an independent institution called the EACC. And Madam Speaker, we sit in these committees of the House every single day. Today I was in 3 committees, Madam Speaker. We look at the reports by the Auditor General. We find serious variances that have led to public loss of funds in counties, Madam Speaker. We pronounce ourselves in those committees. We send it to EACC, Madam Speaker. 2 years later, no government, even a single, is held to account. What is that if it's not procuring EACC, Madam Speaker? What is that if it's not procuring DPP in this country, Madam Speaker? What is that if it's not procuring DCI, Madam Speaker? The abuse of office is not just a simple issue of the backlog and the bottlenecks that we have with investigation. It is clearly intertwined with the issue that because the public service in this country has allowed public servants to make humongous amount of money, we have made a country where people in government have built a buddyism system where they are protecting themselves and do not allow taxes of this country to go back and serve our people. So, Madam Speaker, I believe very strongly, as a young person in this country who has sat in this house time without number, listening to my elders and ranking members in this house speak about the challenges of providing water in this country, about the challenges of providing gas in this country, about the challenges of providing medicine in this country, that I know when I sit in the Finance and Budget Committee, Madam Speaker, that it's totally possible not to borrow money and provide these services to our people because we have got capacity to raise taxes. But the hemorrhage of those taxes and the lifestyle that our people see, the politicians live, the judges live, the people in the executive live, merely 1 or 2 months after getting into office, Madam Speaker, is a pandemic in this country that we must confront through this bill, Madam Speaker. So I've never been happier about a committee that has sat together in a joint session, the committee that sat and mediated this version of this bill. And I want to thank my brothers and sisters from the Senate and my brothers and sisters from the National Assembly for the version they have come up with, because they have done something unknowingly. They have done something unknowingly of dealing with the Ndegwa Commission that brought us this menace in our country. And I hope that we can fast track this particular bill to come to this house. We agree on that mediated version and give it life and go further to make sure that we're going to champion its implementation outside the precinct of Parliament. Because we are leaders who have been elected by the confidence of people in this country. We have been given the mandate. We have been given trust. Even today, Madam Speaker, I dare say that I know that the President today is facing a lot of scathing attacks on the issue of taxation and scathing attacks on the issues of high cost of living, scathing attacks on why he has entered deeper into the pockets of individuals who are getting salaries in this country. But I can say that that is not the issue. The issue is that people have lost confidence and trust in the public service in this country because of the lifestyle we have chosen to live and the services we have chosen not to give our people by simply being able to trade with government and enrich ourselves as public servants and state officers that do not allow the taxes to go back to our people. It is possible, Madam Speaker, that we can have high taxation as well as higher services to our people. It's possible in our generation. It is possible to restore the confidence of our people in governance in this country. And the journey of that confidence of our people on the president, on us legislators, on the judges in this country, starts with making sure that the conflict of interest bill is given life. It's not simply passed by mere action of Parliament, but is given life and make sure that the idea of enterprising in government, that people are scared of confronting, that members of Parliament are scared of facing, can be able to come to an end in this country. Because if you go to a place like Britain today, Madam Speaker, if you are a public servant who has become a public servant, give the private sector the opportunity to serve the government as the first market in an economy. Let the private sector thrive in making a stronger market economy that can truly give jobs to people, that are jobs that will not only be quality in scale, but also vast and diverse in scale. Because, Madam Speaker, the idea that public service has become a place where even people come with the concept of ghost workers is now becoming a menace in our country. Why is that possible? It is only possible because of conflict of interest. Because people in government have become very comfortable with the idea that if I'm in a place of power, I can create jobs that don't exist, and therefore pay money where there is no value for that money, and be okay that I'm protecting my own. If I'm a Kikuyu, I'm protecting a Kikuyu. If I'm a Kalenjin, I'm protecting a Kalenjin. If I'm a Luo, I'm protecting a Luo because I've got opportunity to employ them for jobs that don't exist. And spending money that is hard-earned by Kenyans where I don't need to spend it. When I could as well easily stop the conflict of interest of employing my own and simply empower and endorse a market economy where the private sector can be able not only to create good jobs, but also go ahead and build an economy that works. Madam Speaker, today I was looking at the BPS that have been brought before me in the House. And Madam Speaker, I can see the inflation has gone down. I can see the inflation is going down. But I cannot relate the inflation with the cost of goods and services in this economy. I am seeing the current account of government is looking very positive, Madam Speaker. But that current account is not as a result of export increase in our economy. It's as a result of import decrease in our economy. Meaning that the economy is not thriving. There is no production that's happening in this economy because nobody sees where the tax is going. Nobody ever sees where the tax is going. It's not empowering businesses. It's not providing services. And Madam Speaker, right now we are at a very big scare. Where USAID, if you look at ODA in government, the services that are supposed to be done by ministerial agencies that we get grants for. But if you look at off ODAs which are not in government, like where USAID comes in place to be able to give a few grants to do things like providing water in the slums, to provide Medicare for people who cannot be able to get it. Madam Speaker, most of that money end up going to the pocket of individuals in terms of administrative costs. I want you to think about it, Madam Speaker, if you give me a minute. Think about it. With the pronouncement of Donald Trump, the President of the United States, that USAID now is not going to give us any money, have we imagined as a country where we are going to go with services that were being lifted by this?
Please give him a minute.
Yes. What is going to happen, Madam Speaker, is that our government is going to be forced to start thinking about spending again our taxes in offering services in that gap. Madam Speaker, we are sitting on a time bomb. Because when these seepages still go on in government, when this porosity still goes on in government, and that menace of ODAs again comes to the government, we are going to face a crisis in this country that can lead to another uninformed revolution that can make this country ungovernable. So I not only stop at seconding this bill as I'm seconding it, but also urging us to go back and reflect as a people, as leaders in this country, that do we want to go with this unsustainable idea of trading in government? Do you want to go with this unsustainable idea of hemorrhaging government and primitively accumulating wealth from government? I don't think we want, because if we collapse our country based on... Madam Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I propose the question that the Senate adopts the report of the Mediation Committee on the Conflict of Interest Bill, National Assembly Bills number 12 of 2023, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 5th December 2024, and further that pursuant to Article 1132 of the Constitution and Standing Order 1673 of the Senate approves the mediated version of the bill. Senator Cherargei, are you there?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. I have read the committee report, but I found it was just a cleanup. Madam Speaker, I am a strong believer in institutions. This country, Madam Speaker, is facing non-implementation of development of institutions. We don't have a shortage, Madam Speaker, of laws that can fight corruption in this country. This report on the conflict of interest is and should be that EACC cannot have capacity to fight white-collar crimes and even transnational crimes. Madam Speaker, you remember in the UK, the famous case of Chicken Gate. The UK could nail down the suspects, but Kenya is yet to, Madam Speaker. You remember the issue of the dam that is in Nakuru, the name is Itare, where even the DCI had to travel to Italy, but there is nothing that came out of it. Madam Speaker, as Parliament, what we should be discussing is that are we appropriating enough funds, capacity, human resource, and ability for EACC to prosecute white-collar crimes? That should be the question that we're having today in the evening, Madam Speaker. I don't see, because if you look at the report that anti-corruption EACC has brought before the Senate, Madam Speaker, is about conviction of bribery of 20,000 shillings, 10,000 shillings, traffic officers being chased. But governors who are facing allegations of corruption, senior national officials are facing allegations, have never been convicted. The only case that we saw that has made a headway is the one of Waititu case, Madam Speaker, where more than close to 600 million was being adjudicated upon, Madam Speaker. But people feel that there was no proper and punitive decision by the court. So from the onset, there are many laws that can fight corruption. Because, Madam Speaker, if I take you to section 42, where conflict of interest has been defined, and the what we call Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, number 3 of 2023, 203, as revised in 20...
Order, Senator Eddy and Senator Montet. Please consult in law terms.
I think the new chairs, Madam Speaker, you should take from retreat. You know, when you become chair, there is a decorum that is expected of you. Madam Speaker, when you look at number 3 of 2003 Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act as revised in 2015, section 42 defines what conflict of interest is, Madam Speaker. One of the grounds, when you look at, Madam Speaker, one of the grounds of corruption, and that is the question the committee should tell us. The corruption offenses, Madam Speaker, are 1, bribery, 2, conflict of interest, 3, corruption, fraud, 4, bid rigging, 5th, misappropriation of funds, 6th, embezzlement, 7, abuse of office, 8, dishonesty in taxes, and the last one is election-related offenses, has been defined as corruption, Madam. So does it mean that we will have to do a law on, for example, Bribery Act? I know it is there. Does it mean we'll do about embezzlement or bid rigging? The law is already there, the anti-corruption law. The aspect we should be discussing is about the enforcement of and the fight against corruption. That is when Kenyans will build the issue. The issue of whether public servants are doing business with government is neither here nor there. That's a moving target. Because, Madam Speaker, if you are all of us, if conflict of interest, for example, today was passed as is, all of us who do farming are side hustle, or you are selling animals like Senator Murgur, or anybody else, we will have to stop. So we need to be very careful so that we don't, you know, Madam Speaker, with the thinning of the pay slip of many Kenyan workers, they are forced to do side hustle, Madam Speaker. Does it mean it's conflict of interest when you, after the Senate is adjourned and you go and look at your kuku somewhere, your ng'ombe somewhere, Madam Speaker, with your indulgence of use of Kiswahili word, Madam Speaker? But the point is we need to be very honest so that, Madam Speaker, we don't, what should happen? And I've seen EACC and Senator Okiya Omtata, the indomitable lion of Busia is here, is charging people with conflict of interest, but they can't establish the link. Madam Speaker, in Nandi the other day, when the scandal of payroll emerged, close relatives of Governor Sang were found to be in the payroll of the county payroll. No one up to today has been charged. And Section 42, the EACC cannot argue today that they don't have the law to charge. Section 42 of Anti-Corruption Economic Crimes Act of 2003, as revised in 2016, provides for definition of what is conflict of interest. It is about the enforcement and the fight against corruption, Madam Speaker. It is not about anything else. We need to appropriate more resources. Our judges, I know there is an issue with the Supreme Court at the moment. And there are procedures on how that one can be handled, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I want to appeal that what we are having at the moment, Madam Speaker, is something more serious, because I have seen the committee observe that the bill seeks to consolidate role into conflict of interest in public service. But I expected the committee, joint committee of National Assembly and the Senate, to come up on how we can clean up. They have not given us, in all referrals that they have done, they have said we will do laws relating to conflict of interest in public service, consolidate the laws. Why didn't the committee come up with a proposal of legislative? How long will we take? We know we are midterm of the Senate. Can the committee, the joint committee of mediation, come up with a version of legislative intervention agreeable by the both houses so that we can fast track, Madam Speaker, so that it becomes very easy? Madam Speaker. So the committee should have given us a legislative intervention on how to consolidate the role relating to conflict of interest in public service, so that we know. Madam Speaker, most of the civil servants, I have told you, they have side hustle. Some people are hiring tilling and Narok, they are planting wheat. Does it mean since you are a principal of school YX, and on weekend when you are off, you are seeing your wheat in Narok, does it mean that's conflict of interest? Because you are earning from different sources. So, Madam Speaker, we need a legislative intervention that will tell us how the conflict of interest is handled in the public service. And assume you are a chief somewhere, Madam Speaker, and your husband is hired as an ACC in Malindi, and you are a chief somewhere in Nyakach, in Kisumu. What does the law say? Of course, you are related by marriage. Or your son applies for a job you are not aware. You are a senator here. Your son applies to a job, the Public Service Commission, they are hired. Can somebody say that's a conflict of interest? So we need to be very clear so that we don't play to the... I've seen people getting excited because this below some United Nations, some NGOs, we need to pass this law. Madam Speaker, when you look at principles of law, we should do the law that functions within the society of Kenya. This law is a law that has been brought by the NGOs and people who want to look nice before the Western countries. The other day they stopped USAID. No, so Madam Speaker, we need to be very careful so that we don't import things that can easily abort in our society. You and me know that you can have as many cousins as thousands. Does it mean if your cousin of your cousin of your cousin is hired, for example, in county government and you are the senator? What does it say about conflict of interest? So let us not rush, and I thought this mediation version should have involved both houses, Madam Speaker, so that we don't set ourselves up against our own society, Madam Speaker. Another aspect I wanted to point out, because I have 3 points, is on the issue. I agree in clause number 41 that we need to limit the time of suspension to be 90 days with the leave of court if there is extension. We saw governors, a number of governors, when they were under investigation of corruption cases, they are being suspended because they have executive powers. 90 days is enough. In fact, during my time, Madam Speaker, when I used to be the chair JLAC, we had even proposed that the case of corruption should be heard and dispensed within 24 months. In the last session, we came up with a proposal. In fact, at that time, we had a multi-agency team that was co-chaired by the chairs of JLAC in the National Assembly and the Senate, and the members were AG, NIS, KRA, and we sat in this same chamber, and we agreed that corruption cases must and should be dispensed within 24 months. And I agree with the chair that some people could take advantage. But what do we prevent when the gossip and your political saboteurs want to remove you from office? We must guard against that. These 90 days, I agree with the committee that it is more than sufficient. Let somebody be suspended from the office if it is a governor, but let it make it 90 days. Let them investigate and prosecute. But the committee should have added that the corruption cases must be heard and be dispensed within even 2 years. Because we know the backlog that is there in the courts of law, Madam Speaker. The fight against corruption cannot be won easily. You remember the former president, and I think the current CS has said we lose 2 billion Kenyan shillings through corruption. And it is true. The government has tried to streamline payment of government services through e-citizen, Madam Speaker. And we are yet to see that. The benefit of, you can see if we are losing 2 billion per day, it looks like we have domesticated corruption. The fight against corruption, we must be stringent. And therefore, 90 days should and must be applied, including governors, because they have executive powers that can be done, but also the case should be heard and determined within 2 years. And I think judiciary should take the lead. I know judiciary is facing a lot of challenges at the moment. The Judicial Service Commission, I've had people saying we should have formed judiciary ombudsman to listen to the complaints, but I believe the Judicial Service Commission has powers to do so. And in any case, judiciary, we don't want jury pesa, Madam Speaker. You saw the ruling of majority and minority. It took 2 years for the court to determine. What is that about it? As we went to, Madam Speaker, you are aware in the last session, led by our Speaker Emeritus Kenneth Makelo Lusaka, and then the Deputy Speaker, the current Deputy President, and yours truly was the chair of JLAC. We did draft pleadings and moved to Milimani law courts before Justice Weldon Korir on 24 legislations that had been passed without concurrence of the Senate by the National Assembly, including the health laws, which health is devolved. Can you believe up to today the courts have never given a direction about such interventions? That's why sometimes people, we are not, judiciary is not beyond criticism. And that is why we are telling them, do your job, fast track these cases. You have even learned cases are staying here for 30, 40 years. And that is why we are telling judiciary backlog. But I want also to blame Parliament to some extent. Madam Speaker, judiciary has even, if you give judiciary, they request for 40 billion. And then, Madam Speaker, you give 18 billion, 20 billion. What are we saying? They don't have capacity, ability, human resource to dispense the cases. So even as we blame judiciary for slowing of judgments, we must also as a parliament blame ourselves because we have not allocated enough resources to judiciary to dispense of the cases that we have. Madam Speaker, in clause number 46, that will be my second last point, is on the liability question against the EACC or person. This question has not been answered by the committee. I don't know why. That sometimes the EACC officers or any other entity can act overzealous. I don't know, Madam Speaker, sometimes they are private prosecutions. So I don't know in this case of EACC liability, if they are arresting somebody and they destroy their property, where does it? Because the committee says is an entity mandated by to ensure compliance and enforcement of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which includes the conflict of interest. The Senate, we had said, we had, of course, prevented them, but where do you stop the liability? Because we have seen in many cases, when the arrest happened, Madam Speaker, is it, we need to know. Because we don't want to see EACC coming to your house and turning upside down everything without proper investigative mechanisms. I know they can get court of law, so that we, and then liability. What happens when, if they arrest you with milk or with tomatoes and they take to custody and that tomatoes and milk gets spilled, who should be held accountable and liable? So I think on the issue of liability, I agree, Madam Speaker, that we need to prevent these people from being subject to civil and criminal proceedings. But to what extent? I think that is what we need to do. Even the president, there is a level a president can be given exemption from liability to a particular, especially they should have day on discharge of official duties. I think that should have been the essence of moving, Madam Speaker. On the issue of management of conflict of interest, I think on this one, the committee has said, therefore, the repeal of Public Officer Ethics Act is necessary, which I agree. But all said and done, this matters has been captured in Leadership and Integrity Act that should have been, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and I agree that we need to clean up the laws that we fight against corruption. This will be my last remark. We need to agree to clean up the laws that fight corruption in this country. But I've told you, Madam Speaker, it is not about the laws. It is our values as a society, as Article 10. It is the ability and capacity to give resources to EACC. Does EACC have enough capacity to fight white-collar crimes? Does it have a capacity? You know, most of these thieves steal through papers. Do they have resources to follow the money that there is what we call, Senator Mutata, I don't know whether you remember these islands, Cayman Islands, tax where they hide the stolen loot. Where is it? Yeah? Tax havens, like Cayman Islands. You remember the famous case of KPLC, Kishuru, and the rest. Or does it have, can they have capacity to go and follow up in Dubai? In many other cases, Madam Speaker. Does this issue of lifestyle audit, can it be done to officers who just get offices? When you go to the village or when you pass big towns, you are told this apartment is so and so. The other day, he could not even afford to pay even 1 or 2 liters of driving 2,000 cc. You find gentleman is driving 5,700 cc. We were even told of an officer who used to fly from here to Machakos via helicopter because they have a lot of money at disposal, Madam Speaker. So we need also to work on the lifestyle audit, Madam Speaker. I agree, you know, we don't want to criminalize wealth and glorify poverty, but we must be very realistic. I think one of the reasons, and Senator who seconded just said, one of the reasons that Gen Z rose up was on this issue of opulence. There is a former United States America ambassador who was here that you were eating and vomiting on our shoes. I don't know, was it Michael Reinberger or Hemston who said you are eating and vomiting on our shoes? That is what is happening. We are not saying civil servants, they should of course ensure they discharge their duty with all the power, but also we must be realistic as a country. What works for us? What is important as a country? So I've realized this mediation version of the bill was more of a cleanup, the conflict of interest bill, but let us be careful, let us not pass the laws to just make World Bank and other Bretton Woods institutions to be happy at the expense of how we are as Kenyans. There are things that can work and things that cannot work. But this conflict of interest is one that has been defined. Madam Speaker, I want to clarify, conflict of interest under Section 42 of Anti-Corruption Economic Crimes Act is already defined. So the question is, what is it that they want to achieve? And I think if we look at this bill, it will be very, but I am still disappointed. I want to challenge the committee that let us also now push for EACC to prosecute people. If it is in Nandi, if it is in Bomet, West Pokot, Senator Omtata, I can see your governor is constructing many things here in Karen and all over the place. Yet when he was not a governor, he was not doing those things. So I will give you in private such information. So what is happening when I speak? So people are having wealth that they cannot even explain, unexplained wealth. When somebody, Madam Speaker, with those many remarks, I oppose. Thank you.
Senator Omtata.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity to address this August House. And it's always a big honor to speak after the bull of Nandi, the indomitable Senator Cherargei. Thank you very much for the contribution you have made. And having looked at the report, we are making a new law called the Conflict of Interest Act, because it's still a bill right now. In the long title, It calls itself a bill for an act of parliament to provide for the management and regulation of conflict of interest and for connected purposes. I wish it had read as a bill to stop theft of public assets. We run the risk of covering the theft of public assets into very, very many poetic and beautiful words. Yes, we are going to have this law. But I don't see its capacity to resolve the question of theft of public assets, which is really the problem at the heart of the issue. It's important, I agree, that the conflict of interest, and as the bill says, be managed and be regulated. And we have got many provisions that say where somebody is conflicted, they pronounce their conflict, and if it is going to blur their judgment, they are supposed to recuse themselves from a particular process. We wait to see how far this bill will go when it becomes law.
Honorable Senators, it is now 6:30 p.m., time to adjourn the Senate. Senator Mutata, you have 18 minutes to go when we resume debate. For the record, I would like to report that orders number 10, 11, 12 have been deferred. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until tomorrow, Wednesday, 26th February 2025 at 9:30 a.m.
They can work with on matters of insurances, because you have lost a lot of money, a lot of property through dubious also insurance firms. Therefore, we would love to have professionals, like the way we have marketers professionals. Myself, I'm a marketer. Therefore, we would admire to have such professionals which have are really guarded well in the law. And Madam Speaker, another thing I thought it will also assist Kenyans. I sometimes ask if Kenya was traveling to Uganda or to Tanzania, and probably there was an accident with a foreign vehicle in a foreign country, what would happen? Therefore, when I saw this bill, it's also making sure that it has covered professionals in Kenya and the East Africa region. I find it will assist us, Madam Speaker. And another thing also I have loved about it, it is because the same bill establishes the Insurance Institute of Kenya, which becomes a professional organ, which is really going to guide and to come up with the right procedures and the processes to ensure that there's also good conduct and also to install disciplines in this country. And Madam Speaker, why I seriously support it, I had also a challenge this year where I just wanted to renew my insurance. And by coincidence, where I was going, I did not even tell people whom I was. And I realized someone was even trying to come up like, we cannot insure your vehicle. There's a claim raised against your vehicle. And actually it was a pure lie. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I am expecting this bill is going to make a lot of transparency also. It is going to ensure that there is a proper communication. There is also right information, because most of the times, another problem Kenyans have, it's where after you have gotten a problem, there is lack of right information, and sometimes there's a lot of hide and seek. Therefore, Kenyans suffer so much. For KK, Kimani Kuria, who has come up with this bill, we support it. Probably it is now our responsibility to find where we can improve it so that our Kenyans can benefit it. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for that opportunity. And this was good work by the committee which has been led by KK. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Member for Elders, Honorable Kainan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm a member of the committee. And this bill has come at a time when this country is faced with many challenges. Madam Speaker, the insurance sector plays a critical role in the economic stability by providing financial security against risks and uncertainties. And that is the very basic definition of insurance. In Kenya, Madam Speaker, and first of all, I must admit that I have an interest in this sector. It was the first sector that gave me an opportunity to make a living when I left university. So it's an area that I'm very familiar with and I'm very fond of. Madam Speaker, in Kenya, the industry has witnessed a significant growth, necessitating the establishment of a robust regulatory framework to uphold professionalism and integrity and safeguard the consumers against many risks, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is an industry that has been associated with fraud, with many other illegal street activities. It's only fair that at this time, in this modern day in Kenya, some of the critical activities in the sector must be predictable, must be measurable, must be practical, and must be value-driven. And this is one thing that this sector has lacked, and this bill attempts to provide this, Madam Speaker. And therefore, recognizing this need, this bill, this proposed bill, seeks to institutionalize the regulation of or regulatory framework for the entire insurance industry professional, Madam Speaker, through a structured oversight mechanism. Over the years, many players in this sector have resisted, just like many other sectors, to come under one structured professional entity. And you understand the reasons, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the proposed bill also represents a significant step towards strengthening Kenya's insurance sector by instituting a regulatory oversight, enhancing professionalism, and protecting consumers. Consumers, Madam Speaker, one of the principles of insurance, Madam Speaker, the 7 principles I must admit, is you must act in utmost good faith. Can you define this? Can you quantify this, Madam Speaker? In this modern day Kenya, it's difficult. Utmost good faith is one of the first principles. The second principle, Madam Speaker, is you must indemnify the consumer. That very person who has taken this cover. The other bit is, but it must also contribute to the welfare of that particular individual, that particular insurer, Madam Speaker. The other principle is it must minimize loss. That's why you take a cover. In case this happens, I must get this in return. For that to happen, Madam Speaker, both the insurer and the consumer must have some sort of an understanding. Previously, it was in good faith. Can that continue in this modern dialogue where artificial intelligence, where all sort of groupings have taken over the global business system, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, the other one is you must have an insurable interest. And this is why today in this modern day Kenya, that itself has been a debatable issue, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, addressing these implementation gaps, Madam Speaker, or reality gap, Madam Speaker, requires a robust, and of course, we must also admit that the public, the Kenyan public is so much, informed. The atmosphere is pregnant with certain expectations when we talk about the benefits of a certain sector. That expectation must be met by who? By the sector. Through who? Through the professionals. In what mechanism? Through a legally acceptable mechanism, Madam Speaker. And this is one thing that we have struggled to do, Madam Speaker. And therefore, what addressing this implementation gaps, Madam Speaker, requires a robust dispute resolution mechanism that will be crucial in realizing the full potential of having an insurer, Madam Speaker. These refinements, the bill can effectively, therefore, mean the essence, actually, And I want to commend those who come up with, those who have contextualized this brilliant idea, Madam Speaker, effectively transforms the insurance landscape, fostering a trustworthy, efficient, locally and globally competitive industry. And Madam Speaker, once this is done, it provides employment opportunities for many Kenyans. It contributes to the economic well-being, Madam Speaker. It also contributes to the capital growth and the wealth growth of the people of Kenya, Madam Speaker. And it makes Kenya an investment destination, Madam Speaker, because insurance attracts a lot of capital investment on what I can call hot monies. You must have had this. The individuals, Madam Speaker, or regions that have a lot of resources and are looking forward to areas where they can invest, Madam Speaker. And therefore, the bill provides regulation for insurance professionals. These professionals are just like other professionals. The lawyers have the Law Society of Kenya. The accountants have the accountants. Madam Speaker, the architects have the engineers have this. So the professionals in this particular industry who have resisted over the years come in under one professional entity. The bill cures by proposing to establish 3 critical regulatory entities, Madam Speaker. And these are the Insurance Institute of Kenya, the Insurance Professionals Examination Board, and the Registration of Insurance Professionals Committee, Madam Speaker. These entities will not only examine, will not register, will not only regulate insurance professionals to uphold ethical conduct and mandate industry standards, but will formalize structures that the practitioners are expected to adhere to in their everyday professional engagement, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, secondly, the bill also attempts to bring professional standards. You are not just every quack who has a piece of paper, who can go to the streets, talk to Sweet Talk, a motor vehicle owner, an individual who is struggling to have life insurance, a medical insurance, must meet certain professional standards. Meaning you are expected to undertake a minimum professionally driven, professionally centered, professional-oriented examination so that you understand the dynamics of that particular sector. So it's not going to be a free-for-all industry where every person is expected to carry a business card, a bag, and pretend to be an agent of any particular entity. And I'm glad that this has been proposed in the bill. And therefore, Madam Speaker, this being a financial sector, any financial sector, professionalism and adherence to ethical codes are paramount. And this is critical in this bill. Therefore, by mandating stringent qualification criteria and continuous oversight, Madam Speaker, the bill aims to elevate the level of confidence, competence, and integrity among insurance professionals to any other critical financial, Madam Speaker, professional. Therefore, once this is done, this in turn will foster confidence in the sector, reinforcing credibility, because I said one of the principles of insurance is to act in utmost good faith. I think this only happens in certain societies, Madam Speaker, and it's slowly waning because of the changing dynamics of the human race, and therefore reinforcing the credibility of a sector that is largely driven by action in good faith, Madam Speaker. The other bit, the third component in this bill, Madam Speaker, is consumer protection. What safeguards do we have for the many vulnerable insurance seekers, Madam Speaker? And therefore, a well-regulated insurance industry directly benefits the consumer, Madam Speaker, thereby making the Kenya insurance industry not only competitive in Kenya, regionally, but also globally. And this is one setup that Kenya has been attempting to acquire over the years, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and therefore, this will minimize the risks of fraud, misrepresentation, and malpractices. And therefore, the bill attempts to ensure that only qualified professionals are allowed to practice, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other bit is industrial growth. What do we expect from this? Kenya, we have a struggling economy, Madam Speaker, and we're not supposed to be where we are today. We're supposed to be a leading nation in every sector. And the insurance sector being one of the critical components has also been struggling. And therefore, this regulatory framework that emphasizes professionalism and ethical conduct characterizes industrial sector growth, Madam Speaker. And therefore, by instilling sector confidence and fostering best practices, the bill attempts to position Kenya as a critical insurance sector, not only in Kenya, not only in East Africa, not only south of Sahara, not only the African continent, but Madam Speaker, globally. And this is the status that each of us must also be proud of. Madam Speaker, however, though, there are certain gaps. There are certain gaps that we must also look at. How is this generous institutional?
Your time is up. 1 minute to wind up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The establishment of these regulatory bodies, Madam Speaker, we must have who is going to fund, who is going to staff, how are they going to also be managed? Is one thing that I think we need to think out of the box after this and come up with a platform. Madam Speaker, the other bit is who will administer this continuous professional development, Madam Speaker, in the name of continuous professional assessment. This again, we must look at it in a wider insurance sector globally. The other bit, Madam Speaker, is public access and consumer protection and consumer education. We must also look at it. The other one is dispute resolution mechanism. Again, we must come up with a level of arbitration. It is there as one of the things, but I think it must also capture within this bill, chairman and other groups, so that as we go to the public, this is done. Otherwise, I support the bill, and it's critical, and I pray that once it's enacted, it goes through the other stages, the Kenyan public is going to benefit from this reformist bill. I support, Madam Speaker.
Very well said. Member for Kaiti, Honorable Kimilu.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to contribute on this important bill, Madam Speaker. And I want to, before I give my contribution, I want to thank Honorable the member for Molo, Kimani, for coming up with such an important bill, because, Madam Speaker, where we are in our country now, we need to make things right, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to support the insurance bill 13/2024 because, Madam Speaker, it is very important for such a bill to, because it will make, we make things right in our country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, insurance bill, once it becomes a law, will be in a position to strengthen the sector and make the sector to gain a lot of support and weight. Madam Speaker, for national insurance bill, it will come up with a good measure to make sure that, Mr. Speaker, as a sector, we make sure that we make those quacks who sometimes just pause to be insurance men and women, Madam Speaker, that once it becomes a bill, because it will make sure that before you become an insurance person, you have to meet a certain criteria, Madam Speaker. And this will also make sure that no quacks who will be enter in this sector pretending to be insurance people, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we also need, once it becomes a law, it also educate Kenyans, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I have a case in my constituency, Kaiti. And last week I was handling a case whereby a guy had got an insurance with his car, and after an accident, he has been taken to SACCOs for more than a year without being paid. Madam Speaker, when this fraudulent bill becomes a law, some of these small things will be avoided, because things will be right, because we will not be in a position to take our clients into SACCOs, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the bill will also help empower the institution and make the institution look more better than it is now, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, also the bill will also help the sector to gain, as when people are trained into a certain level, they have certificate, and they will not hide anywhere, Madam Speaker, and pretend that what they are doing is right, and else they are not doing the right thing, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, also the bill, when it becomes to law, it will help the business of this insurance to be recognized. Madam Speaker, if I was going through the bill, Madam Speaker, and I see even globally, Madam Speaker, if you go to a country like France and UK, they have the same bill, Madam Speaker. And this bill, it's important, because if even globally we can have somewhere to go and benchmark, and a country like Kenya, we need to come up with such a law. In fact, it came at the right time, Madam Speaker. And this is the time we need to join hands together. I urge all my colleagues to join us together. We pass this bill to become a law so that we can also help our country, Madam Speaker. It will also, Madam Speaker, help make the profession, like we have a law profession bill. We also have the same law, profession in law in medics, and having this in insurance, Madam Speaker, it will be very important. Madam Speaker, also conmen and con women, opals. I remember there are some of financial institutions whereby someone was conned, and when he was trying to follow his money, he get that he ended up and because he had already insured the organization he borrowed the money was insured, but he ended up losing a lot of money because there were no offices, there were no any structure on the insurance, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, putting good structure in our institution, Madam Speaker, it will help this country. And Madam Speaker, because I can see time is running and also want my colleagues to contribute, I support, Madam Speaker.
Very well. Member for Kitui West, Honorable Nyenze.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also hear my views on this great bill on insurance. Let me take this opportunity to also congratulate a Member of Parliament Molo, Ms. Honorable Kimani, for bringing such a bill. Madam Speaker, I note that this is a bill which will make provision for establishment of an institute, an insurance institute of Kenya, and also come up with the insurance professionals, examination body for the professionals, and also come up with a board which will do the same. And this will provide for examination. It will also, this body will also provide for registration and regulation of standards and procedures. And by doing so, such an institute and such a body would bring checks and balances to this institution. So this institution will be run with the standards, with the guidance, and it will bring regulation, it will bring supervision of the insurance sector. And by doing so, it will just be like any other professional body, like we have in other fields, like with the engineers, with the marketers, with the lawyers, with the human resource personnel. All these people have their institute, and whereby there are checks and balances. It's also very important to note that such professionals will actually be issued with the practicing certificates. And these certificates, which they will get from this institution, will help them in their registration. And this one will make sure that people who are not disciplined, because it will also bring about discipline, that people who are not disciplined can be deregistered. And this one will be through a disciplinary committee, which will ensure that these people follow the procedures and the rules which are set out in the institute. Madam Speaker, we find a lot of conmen, and also as a result, and quacks, and also blockers who are not serious with the work of insurance, but they have found themselves there without the qualifications. And these ones have meant even the ones who are qualified lose trust in the insurance, especially with the investment with insurance. Most Kenyans doubt whether when you invest through an insurance, by the end of the day, you'll get your deals. So with such an institute, they will give confidence to Kenyans. They will give confidence to people even when they insure their vehicles, even when they invest with insurances. They will know that there is somebody where I can report. There is somebody which takes care of discipline. Such instances have happened where people, and I know of a person who insured with an insurance for the vehicle, and then they thought they were fully covered. only for the person to be turned down when the car had an accident, only to find that in the first place they were not insured at all because the money was not remitted where it was supposed to be remitted. And such an institute and such a body would ensure that there are checks and balances and people would have confidence in this institution. So this is a very good body which will bring assurance to the insurers that things are being done in the correct way. So with all those main remarks, Madam Speaker, I support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Kuresoi South, you're not visible on my screen. Next to you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice in this important bill. First and foremost, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Honorable Kimani Kuria, MP for Molo, for coming up with this bill. That is the Insurance Professional Bill 2024. And from the onset, Madam Speaker, I want to say that I support this bill. I have just looked at the bill, and Madam Speaker, I want to say that this bill will bring a lot of sanity in the insurance industry. This bill has just come at the right time. People have suffered for long. The principle of insurance, there is the principle of indemnity. And the principle of indemnity is to bring back the person who has suffered from a loss to his former position financially. But people have suffered because they've been dealing with the wrong people. When accidents occur, you find those people disappearing. So, Madam Speaker, I can see now this bill bringing in a lot of professionalism in the industry. And therefore, professional misconduct will be a thing of the past. Madam Speaker, this bill also provides for insurance professional examinations board, which will be preparing for syllabuses for the insurance. It will also be issuing certificates. So in brief, Madam Speaker, I want to say once again that this bill has just come at the right time. And once it becomes a law, I want to encourage my colleague. We sensitize our people to register properties with various insurance companies. Otherwise, with those very few remarks, I want to say that I support. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no more interest on this bill, I call the mover to reply.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And again, I want to thank the members of my Committee of Finance and National Planning for the input that you've put on this bill. And I would like also to single out Honorable Kinan, who has also sat through this debate this afternoon. I have thoroughly enjoyed the contributions that have been made by all the honorable members that have spoken. And I want to assure you that the views that you made, we're going to use that to enrich this particular piece of legislation. And maybe as a reply, one of the issues that I think was raised by the MP for Funyula, when seconding, was on the question on the fourth schedule, which provides for establishment of a disciplinary process for these particular insurance professionals. Honorable Speaker, the intuition by the honorable member was that this could disadvantage these professionals or be a source of unnecessary bureaucracy. And maybe I checked through what other pieces of legislation that registered on professionals have said, and if you look at the Accountants Act that regulates CPAs and company secretaries, there is a disciplinary process provided for in the 5th schedule. The Engineers Act has part 7 that also provides for disciplinary process. The Human Resource Management Professionals Act has part 5 that also provides for disciplinary process. The Advocate Act, part 11, also provides for a disciplinary process. So this particular provision of a disciplinary process is not any different from what has been provided for in the other piece of legislation. So we are hoping to accommodate as many of those remarks by honorable members as possible during Committee of the Whole House and ensure again that we have a very good piece of legislation. On the question by Honorable Kinan on the Exchequer, I think it's important to clarify that we have expressly provided that this particular institute will not have to be funded by the Exchequer because the exams that will be administered would be paid for by the students, and therefore there will not be any need to have it burden taxpayers any further. With that, Honourable Speaker, I beg to reply and thank everyone that has contributed immensely to this particular great piece of legislation, and to thank the people of Molo constituency for giving me a chance to serve in this parliament. And when they told me when they come to Parliament, they want to see the MP proposing good laws for this country, and this is one of them. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honourable members, we will defer the putting of the question to the next appointed time. Next order.
Order number 11, the Political Parties Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 35 of 2022, second reading.
Honourable members, for the convenience of the House, this business will be deferred to the next appointed time. Order, members. Honourable members, in the time being 6:58 p.m., this House stands adjourned until Wednesday, 26 February 2025 at 9:30 a.m.